I am Vector, and I am not Daredevil. I'm here with Super Tim. How you doing, Tim?
Why would I care about a world I no longer have any stake in?
Oh, that's a very good question, and we're going to answer that today because we're talking Watchmen, the most uh, famous, I would say, the most what's what's the most acclaimed comic book of all
Yeah,
time.
most
Watchmen.
critically acclaimed graphic
Yes,
novel probably ever written.
yes, we're going to be talking about that, and there's also the new Watchmen animated that just came out, part one. We're going to be talking about that and a host of other things. We're trying out a new format this week on This Comic Cooks. So let us know if you like it. Shout out to the Filmcast, a great movie podcast with Dave Chen, David Hardware, and Jeff Kanata. They have been an inspiration for this format change. So we're going to try something different this week on This Comic Cooks. Let's start out by talking about a little bit comic book news, Tim. I've been wanting to talk comic news for a while. Um,
Yes.
Two people brought this to my attention. You and Shiny Plastic People, Mr. Chris Plastic over at Shiny Plastic People. I'll leave a link in the show notes. He does a great YouTube channel all about toys, 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 action figures, all the amazing plastic that's out in this world. So definitely check out Chris's channel. But the DC Comics, the official DC Comics, has decided that comics are too big, Tim. They're just they're just too unwieldy. You can't fit them in your pocket, right? You can't get them to a reasonable size. So they have now said that they're going to introduce compact comics for portability. They're going to be 5 by 5, 5.5 by 8.5, and they're going to be $9.99. DC Comics actually released a little trailer for these compact comics, and they're going to have those acclaimed comics I was talking about: Watchmen, Batman: The Court of Owls, All Star Superman, Far Sector, and a host of other amazingly acclaimed comics are coming down the
Yeah.
pipeline. So, Tim, I want to get your thoughts real quick, and then we'll get my thoughts. What do you think about a smaller format for comics?
I mean, it's very interesting because I have a hard time reading physical comics a lot of the times. So the fact that they're even smaller, like that's kind of hard for me to read. But I get why they're doing this, and I like that they're starting off with all these great comics because starting off we've got, like you said, Watchmen, Batman: Court of Owls, All Star Superman. We we just had the Wonder Woman Earth One. We had the Joker by Azzarello, Hush, which is a great one. I love that they're starting out with these really great comics to really, but this new format can get people to, hey, you're a little shy on comics, maybe you're not sure, but this is a really great thing because in the book industry, there's like three different kinds of formats that you can have as far as physical books. You got your hardcovers, you got your regular trade paperbacks, and you got your mass market paperbacks. A lot of people, not myself, but a lot of people prefer mass market paperbacks because they can, if they don't have a Kindle, they can just stick it in, people can stick it in their purse, they can stick it in their backpacks, and not have to lug a huge book around. So I think this is great. I think it's great. I think this is a really way to get really cool comics out there, and like some stuff that's coming out the like pipe. We got next year we got Kingdom Come, Deceased by Tom Taylor, which I've been meaning to check out. Uh, Superman Birthright, Superman Batman Book One. That's gonna be awesome. I'm excited. I mean, this is really good. This is really good for comics, I think.
Yeah, I think it's also good for mass market people who are used to like a manga size. These are an inch taller than the average manga, but they are full color, unlike a lot of manga, and they
Yeah.
contain full story arcs for the most part. It's not like a multi-volume thing where you have to keep on going. So I like this idea. I'm really not a physical reader at this point. Tim and I
Yeah.
both, I think, are almost all digital at this point,
Hmm.
and I read pretty much everything on my iPad. But for someone else, this is a great thing. I think for my wife, this is a great thing. This is something that she would be able to put in her purse and carry around with her.
Yeah.
And the $9.99 price point, typically these are like $20 when they first come out, the
Hmm.
trades or the hardcovers, and
Yeah,
nine
like
ninety
a
nine is
trade
a
a
great
trade is usually like $15 to $20,
this is a great
and
price point.
yeah, and have you actually seen any of these like in stores or anything?
I haven't. I've just seen this, trailer that DC put out, and they're showing in people's hands, but
Right.
I have not
I
seen one in the wild.
have seen this because I was in a bookstore the other day, and as I am wont to do, um,
He lives there.
and and I saw like, and the thing is like this Watchmen compact comic was in the section with the mangas, which I thought that was very
Ooh.
interesting. Um, like it was on a table with a bunch of manga, and I held it. And I was like, wow, this is small, and
Mm,
like the the drawings and the art is smaller, but I mean, I could see how people would want to read it this way. It wouldn't be my cup of tea because I don't really feel, because like you said, we're mostly digital, and I read things on my iPad or on my phone, and I really get a sense of the art that way. And I think some of that might be lost in these compact ones, but it's a good way to get somebody into comics who might not be there before.
yeah, so these are DC's compact comics. I even like the naming structure on this. So check
Yes.
those out when they appear in front of your face in the bookstores, and we will keep you posted on if we pick up any. Like I said, for my wife, this might be a good birthday present. She got a birthday around the corner or a Christmas present. We will definitely keep you posted. All right, Tim, we're gonna talk. This is like I said, this is a brand new format that we're trying out. This time we're gonna take a look at what we've been reading over the course of the week. And this is not an all-encompassing because we read a ton of stuff throughout the week,
Oh, sure.
but we wanted to focus this week for our very first installment on Mark Waid's Daredevil run. Now, this is something that I was originally reading as it was coming out in 2011. This took place from 2011 to 2015. Had a multiple string of artists from Paulo Rivera to Marcos Martin. Chris Somney took over for a long time, and then there was some fill-ins. But over the course of this 4-year run, it was critically acclaimed, Eisner Award winning,
Hmm.
and it was always one that I was thinking about in the back of my mind, but there was the very last piece of it I fell off on as I was reading it individually. So I've always been meaning to get caught up, and this was the perfect time because Tim said that he was interested. So I said, "All right, let's go back and reread from the beginning." And there was stuff in there that I had forgotten, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that was great. That was great." So Tim, for you, the very first time reading, what did you think about Mark Waid's Daredevil?
Well, I, I would like to start with what was getting us wanting to read these things, and mostly it was the D23 coverage of the new Daredevil series, Daredevil Born Again, coming to Disney Plus in March. And I was like, I really need to get back into some Daredevil. I need to read some Daredevil. I really want to read Charles Soule's Daredevil, and I'm doing that now. But you were like you need to read Mark Waid's Daredevil. I'm like, okay, and I like Mark Waid. We're both big fans of Mark Waid for all these stuff with Superman and what he's doing in Absolute Power right now, World's Finest, and coming soon Justice League Unlimited. So I was like, can't go wrong with Mark Waid. And this book does not disappoint as far as Mark Waid goes. Because the humor, the heart, he just there I swear the man does there is not a comic character that the man does not intimately understand. I don't get how he does it because he gets Superman, he gets Batman, he gets the Flash, and he gets Daredevil, and I'm just like, what? This man is a tour de force in comics, and it's just incredible. The humor that we get a lot of the times is in Vector's shirt, because prior to this, in other runs that you told me, that Daredevil had outed himself, and he spends pretty much the entire book trying to say, "I'm not Daredevil. I'm not Daredevil." Like whatever you said, what you thought you said, "I'm not Daredevil." And his girlfriend is just like, "Yeah, whatever, Daredevil." And, and lots of great moments. Like lots of great moments in this book. The rapport between Matt and Foggy, which I believe to be the heart and soul of Daredevil books, was really great here. When Foggy got cancer, spoiler alert, in the book, uh, I really felt it, and like I said, the humor, the heart, the action with the art, with Chris Samnee's art was fantastic. I like it really reminded me of Bruno Redondo's art in Nightwing. It's very fluid, like 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 the characters are moving around in a single frame, and it was just a fantastic run. And I started reading his second run, um, where he goes to San Francisco,
And that was where I
and
fell off.
yeah, and rightfully so. It's a little weird because like because Daredevil doesn't have his support system that he has when he's in New York, and it reminded me as why it was a good idea for Daredevil Born Again to have Karen Page, to have Foggy Nelson, to have all these characters that are Daredevil support system in the book, because it reminded me, it's like, yeah, this is why they didn't do that for the for the new Disney Plus series. So yeah, I
Yeah,
really liked it.
that also reminds me of when they took Venom. Originally, Venom was a Spider-Man villain. He lived in New York. Then when he became an anti-hero and he became a little bit popular, they moved him to San Francisco, and they said, "All right, you're a lethal protector now. Now you go live in San Francisco." And it's always weird when you take the New York characters and put them in other places, because
Hmm.
New York has such a unique identity, and a lot of the characters are just kind of tied to, like, Daredevil's Hell's Kitchen. Like, that's I always think of
Right.
Daredevil when I hear Hell's Kitchen. So yeah, it's always interesting. And this one specifically, I recommended to you because it was number one. It's Mark Waid, and as
Sure.
you said, we love Mark Waid, but also it was positive. It was uplifting. I was happy versus the previous two runs before this. Brian Michael Bendis and Ed Brubaker, those 2 runs. Now, first of all, I highly recommend you read those 2 runs.
Hmm.
Though they are this I would say those are the seminal Daredevil runs, and that's what made me a fan of Daredevil. I did not like the character before the Brian Michael Bendis and Ed Brubaker runs. I kind of put them together, and it was Kingpin who outed Daredevil, and it was like you were stripping away everything. Like, at end of those 2 runs, I was like, "You can't strip anymore. He's been stripped to death. Like, there's nothing more you can take away from him, including his secret identity." So when Mark Waid took over, it was like, "Oh, okay. So he's happy." I'm so used to him being down, bad things happening to him. It's very similar to the Parker Luck, where Peter
Uh-huh.
Parker, there's always something bad happening to him. He's always trying to pay his rent. He's always trying to, like, he's always behind on something in his life. And I've actually talked to some friends who said that gets a little bit, like, draining to them. Like, oh, he's
Sure.
always something bad happening to him. Matt Murdock, if you want to talk about always something bad happening to a person, like I said, read those 2, the Bendis and Brubaker runs, and you'll see, like, there I don't know if there's a character in comics that more has been done to him, but this Brubaker, I mean, I'm sorry, this Mark Waid run, it was so different. It was such a contrast, and I was originally like, "Oh, how is he going to do this?" But never doubt Mark Waid. He
No.
always has an intricate knowledge of the characters, like you said, and I feel like he's an encyclopedia on superhero characters, to the point where even at one point, I can't remember when it was, but he was writing the official biographies for each character in the DC universe on DC.com. You would go to Superman, go to Wonder Woman, and there'd be a little, like, a page, and it was like, I don't know, 1 or 2 paragraphs on who the character was, their origin, everything. And Mark Waid wrote every single one. It was like, this is the perfect guy to do this. He can sum
Yeah.
up everything. And I've always been a fan of his, but I think recently, with the stuff that he's been doing, it's like elevated in my eyes. Like, he's been doing this for so long, so consistently. I just have to recognize him and say, man, you have been doing a great body of work and just constantly putting out great stuff. And this Daredevil
Yeah.
run was no different. Like, I agree with everything you said, the heart of it, the humor of it, and then just getting Daredevil. I think that's the bottom line is, does a writer get a character? Sometimes they just not a good fit for certain characters, but Mark Waid, everything I've read, every character he's jumped on he's been
Even
a good
Archie.
fit
Like
for.
I started reading an Archie comic by Mark Waid. I'm like, even this is good. I'm like, what is there nothing like just make a bad book, Mark Waid.
Is there
Like just
anything you
do it. Like
can't
can you like
write, Mark Waid?
yeah, can you just like write so that everybody else like doesn't look as bad? Uh, but yeah, like and like Mark Waid has been doing such great things in comics for, the past 20 years at least. Maybe 30. Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
30.
because oh
And
yeah, that's another real quick. His Flash run in the 90s is the seminal Wally West. Like if you want a Wally West story or you want a West run, make sure you read Mark Waid's Flash. Oh, also in the 90s, he was doing a great Fantastic Four run with Mike Waringo.
mhm.
RIP, he's passed away at this point. But he has been doing a great job, I think, since the 90s. He probably started in the 80s, but the runs that I'm aware of and familiar with are from the 90s.
Yeah, and he's been doing solid work, still doing solid work. Like we talked about this Daredevil run,
It's
all
crazy.
his DC stuff he's been doing. He's been killing it with Absolute Power. He's gonna still be doing World's Finest. He's gonna be doing Action Comics, back in
I can't wait.
Superman. I know, I'm so excited. Like he's doing Justice League Unlimited, which is gonna be fun. Yeah, Mark Waid has been doing great, and this Daredevil, like the art is fantastic. Like even when Chris Somney wasn't on the main art, they would trade off, and it still feels like Daredevil, and they maintained that style that they had been building for you know however many issues, and
Yeah,
it's
I wanted to specifically call that out. Like, I don't know of any other run that they maintain the art style and the consistency throughout. Even in the very beginning, like that very first arc, it's Paulo Rivera and Marcos Martin, and they're going back and forth. They have like Paulo Rivera does a ton of covers over the course of this run, but they're there's never like a consistent feel until Chris Somney comes on, and then he takes over for the majority of the run. But whoever the editor, whoever was picking the artists for this, it was like, man, you did not pick a bad artist. Like everybody who came on
mhm.
brought their A games and did a fantastic job, and it never felt jarring because that's a our friend Schaff talks about a lot in comics when a different artist comes on and their style is completely different, it can very much feel jarring to a reader who's been reading a run or a story arc, and then all of a sudden in the middle, it's a different artist. Now, if you're changing story arcs or it's a brand new story,
Yeah,
it's
that
not
makes
as big.
sense.
But if you're in the middle of the story, yeah, it's definitely something that you want to look out for. So with this run, they did a flawless job of switching out artists and not making it obvious. Like all of them have great styles, all of them fit and
Yeah.
mesh well together. So yeah, I
Yeah,
just got to call
especially
that out.
when like near the end of the run, Chris Somney had a baby,
Yes,
and he
yes.
had to drop off the book for a couple issues. It still didn't feel like they'd missed a step. And the
Yeah.
only thing I can compare it to is with Nightwing, is
Mm,
like there are issues where Bruno Redondo is not doing the art on the book, and it wasn't until Fallen Grayson started happening that I realized that he wasn't on
hmm.
like a lot of issues, and I'm like, what? When did that happen? They were able to maintain Bruno's style, but not make it feel like they were copying. And it was the same thing here with Daredevil. And near the end of the run, we talked about I'm not Daredevil. Every moment that like there's a point where Matt Murdock walks into a Christmas party wearing the shirt that Vactor is wearing as a Christmas sweater that says "I'm not Daredevil." Almost like that made me laugh out loud so hard. It was
Yeah.
great. Uh, and another thing Mark Waid likes to do in his writing, he's like, as of late, likes to play around with expectations of comic readers because he
Mm.
knows the medium. And there's a point where Foggy and Matt are speculating who's behind all the stuff that's been going on in the book, and he's like, "Well, maybe it's Stiltman." and like and the book like pauses and then they just start laughing. I'm like, that's great. Like I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's
That
fantastic.
type of humor is found throughout. And speaking of that Fallen Grayson run, we are going to be talking about the Tom King. I'm sorry, Tom King, the Tom Taylor complete run of Nightwing on a future episode. So stay tuned on This
Yes.
Comic Cooks. We're going to be talking all about that. But I think both of us give Daredevil, Mark Waid's Daredevil run a thumbs up and highly recommend. So definitely check out. It's on
Yeah.
Marvel Unlimited. As a wise man once said to me, Marvel Unlimited is your friend. So you can subscribe, you can get this entire run, even if it's for a month. You can subscribe to it, read the whole thing, and then
Yeah.
unsubscribe. But I
Yeah.
do the yearly.
If you want something to kind of get you psyched for Daredevil Born Again coming in March, then this is a good starting point to
Yes.
get yourself into Daredevil.
Yeah. Excellent. So that was Mark Waid's Daredevil run. Now let's get into our featured review this week. We're going to be talking all about Watchmen. Now, Tim, you, uh, it was kind of the genesis came from you to talk about Watchmen. What made you want to go back to Watchmen and reread
Well,
it?
I've like as of late I've been reading a lot more comics like this year. And every time I start Watchmen, something always happens. I get like 5 or 6 issues in, and then something always happens, and then time goes by. I'm like, I'm gonna read Watchmen again, and I start over and I start over and I start over. And finally, like, you know what? I'm gonna start Watchmen and I'm gonna end it because, as a comic reader, you hear about important books. You hear about Kingdom Come. You hear about um Craven's Last Hunt. You hear Superman Doomsday, Batman Nightfall, all these important comics in the history of comics. Well, no book, I think, um, is more important in the history of comics and graphic novels, importance of the medium than Watchmen. I actually took a comic book class in college. It was awesome. It was great because because I used Marvel Unlimited. All the books that were on the curriculum were all Marvel books, so I didn't have to pay for any
Oh,
books. So that was nice.
nice.
Anyway, um, but I had a professor who said there is comics before Watchmen and there is comics after Watchmen because everything changes after Watchmen because what it does is it deconstructs and analyzes the superhero phenomenon because this is the 80s. Comics have been going up and down, and so Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons and the fantastic art he does uh analyze like the superhero idea. Like, is it a good idea? Is it, are superheroes good? Are they helpful to the public? Do they do anything? And that's really great. And you've when we've talked about Watchmen, you always say it's unfilmable, it's unadaptable, because the times that they've tried to adapt it. We'll talk about more about chapter one here soon, but the film, the Zack Snyder film, I think does the book a disservice because the reason why it's unfilmable and it's hard to adapt and why people have struggled with it, for 20 years or at least, is it's so dependent on the medium that it's in that it's just hard to adapt because there are whole issues that are devoted to each character. There's a whole issue devoted to Night Owl. There's a whole issue devoted to Rorschach. There's a whole issue devoted to Silk Spectre 2. There's a whole issue devoted to Ozymandias, to Dr. Manhattan. And you get pieces of those things in the film. But I think overall, um, if you want the complete Watchmen experience, I would recommend reading the book. I mean, as a reader, I
Yeah.
always say the book's always better. In this case, it is because
Yes.
it's
100%.
just how it analyzes superheroes, and you know, there's only one superpowered superhero, and Doctor Manhattan is obviously an allegory for Superman, and so how that's tackled is very interesting.
Yeah, and there's two things that I wanted to spinoff from what you said. Number one, it being unadaptable, and the Zack Snyder version, which on its own is a fine action movie. If you don't know Watchmen, if you just want to go
Hmm.
watch an action movie, okay, yeah, that's fine. The reason why I also agree that it's a failure of an adaptation is because Zack Snyder, who I think is a great visual storyteller,
Oh,
he
absolutely.
came from music videos and
The
short
scene the scene
commercials.
where, sorry to cut you off, but the scene where in the movie where spoiler alert, Ozymandias kills the comic's over 40 years old. That's fine. Uh, kills the comedian is still the like one of the best scenes of the entire movie.
Yeah, and
I
that's
love
the
how that
opening.
translated. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
like the visuals are great.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and that's his strength, Zack Snyder. His weakness, I think, is storytelling overall, character development.
Hmm.
We could see that in Batman v Superman and a ton of his other work, but they always look great. I mean, he would be a great cinematographer. Like he knows
Yeah.
what looks cool, what looks good and cinematic. But specifically, I think he loses in the Watchmen translation, the adaptation, what you just said. There's only one superpowered being. He makes them all look like they all have powers. They're
Hmm.
jumping up high places. They've got super strength. They're punching people and through doors
Slow
and stuff like.
motion.
And that is not Watchmen. That's not what Alan Moore was. That wasn't
No.
the intent of the book. And also, losing the Black Freighter, there's a ton of stuff in the Black Freighter that thematically ties into Watchmen. And really, I know you can go online and look at Reddit. A lot of people skip when they're reading Watchmen, they skip over the Black Freighter stuff because it seems like it's not tied to the main story.
Oh,
But
they couldn't be
there's
more wrong.
right. I think you don't have a full reading of Watchmen if you don't read the side material, the Black Freighter, and then the is it Under the Hood, the Hollis book
Yeah. Yeah,
that's in there.
Hollis's book. Yeah, Under the Hood.
There's all kind of like that's what makes Watchmen great. There's so many layers, and they're all intricate to the story and to expanding the world, and that's what made this groundbreaking. Also, was like Alan Moore. It's amazing that all this stuff. Um, he just built this from the ground up, and he originally wanted to use DC characters, but DC was like, no, we don't want you making them grim and gritty and defiling our characters. So
Why
he made
Frank
up
Miller
his
did it with
own.
Batman, it's fine.
Yeah, that is interesting because they came out around the same time. Also, that was Dark Knight Returns, and a lot of people, I think, those were like the first original like graphic novels that they would put on the shelf because at the time there weren't every comic was not a graphic novel. Like they wouldn't put it out after the fact, after the individual issues. So
Hmm.
Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen, I think people had them on their coffee table. They oh, these are adult. These are not, for kids. But with Watchmen in particular, like I said, the and you brought up a great point. It was made for comics. It was
Yeah.
specifically written to be a comic, and Alan Moore did that on purpose, and he made things, like you said, the focusing on the individual issues of the specific characters. He did things like adding the Black Freighter storyline. Those are specifically for the comics medium, and that is what makes it great. It's not okay, it's gonna be a movie later, so we're just writing this just to get the movie made, which a lot of time is happening today with,
Oh yes,
a lot of
there are books being written, like not just comics, but also like actual novels being written because they want to make the movie. The
yeah,
latest Hunger Games prequel is a great example of that. They wrote they had the author write that so that they could make a movie. Uh, uh, Ready Player Two, I believe, is going to be a movie one day. Well, who's
yeah,
going to make it? I don't know, but but yeah, these things are like Alan Moore wrote this as a like for a comic, and there's so many layers to it. Like I said, there's whole issues devoted to each character, so you can get a sense of the characters. And by the time we get to the final issue where we're all in with these characters and we're just like feeling for them. When Dr. Manhattan slays Rorschach, which I have questions about, um, and slays Rorschach, you like, oh man, you really feel it. And you mentioned Black Freighter and Under the Hood, like those should not be skipped because they add like what Alan Moore did, like by adding all these little things that you think are just like, okay, I could skip this. This is ancillary material. Swipe, swipe. No, these things they further the story
Yes.
of Watchmen, and by the time you get to that final issue, you understand. Okay, I get what the book is doing here because
Yeah.
man, it's just there's a reason it's a seminal book because nobody has even attempted to do this since.
Right. It's a master class in storytelling from start to finish. The ending, I think, is essential. Another thing that Zack Snyder took out because he said it was
Mm-hmm.
too, um, I don't know, corny, too kiddie, or too weird. It wouldn't make sense to people. But the Watchmen TV show, which came out on HBO, they it's a direct sequel to Watchmen, and they specifically reference the squid. So they're like, no, we're not skipping over it. It's not too cartoony. It's not too kiddie. It's this happened, and here's the ramifications of what happened after Watchmen. So, Tim, did you start that yet?
I have not started that yet.
Okay, let me come back on a future episode and let us know your thoughts on that. I love that series. I think it's fantastic. Damon Lindelof, they did a great job um, picking up the ball after Alan Moore said, "Okay, I'm done with this." They did a great job of enhancing that world and letting you know, hey, here's what a possible future of what happened after Watchmen. I thought it was a great storytelling also from start to finish. Unfortunately, Alan Moore has been burned so many times by these industries, television and by Hollywood, basically, television and movies, that Damon Lindelof went to him. He showed a letter that he wrote to Alan Moore, kind of like, "Sir, I love your work. I want to do justice to it. I want to make sure these characters
Mm-hmm.
are well taken care of." And Alan Moore was like, "F off," basically. Like, he's like, "I don't
Oh
care."
man.
And
Well,
it hit the,
I mean,
I don't blame him at this point.
Zack Snyder's film, and not only that, but also the Wachowskis' V for Vendetta adaptation. I can
The League of
understand.
Extraordinary Gentlemen, which was
Oh
terrible. That movie is one of the worst movies I've ever seen, and that comic is great. League of Extraordinary. There's not a bad Alan Moore comic. Let me put it that way. He's
no.
one of those writers, and I've told you this, that I've never seen a bad work from him. So he's elevated onto that platform with Brian K. Vaughan, Mark Waid. Like there's certain art or authors that I've never read a single bad story from them. They might be out there. I just haven't read them yet. But those artists are able to consistently work at such a high level that they have my utter respect. But I love that Watchmen series. If anyone has not had a chance to check it out, it's the entire thing is on Max, HBO Max. So
Yeah, and
100% recommend that.
also, the last scene with Doctor Manhattan and Ozymandias is so good.
And both
Just there's
characters appear in the show also.
awesome, awesome. And also, like so, Doctor Manhattan like slays Rorschach, and does Dan like not know about that? Like, like it's very unclear because
Yeah,
after the fact, it's shown that Dan and Lori are married. They're going under a alias for
right.
reasons. You can infer why they're doing that. And yeah, I just like, does he ever find out? Does he ever know if that happened? And it's not a problem. It's not a dangling thing. It's not a plot hole. I just like, what happened there?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder they don't mention anything about that in the show, but yeah, that would be interesting because their relationship was so tied and they had each one of them had like they played off of the other one. So yeah, that was just
Yeah.
from start to finish, the detective story, like the mystery, all
Uh
of
huh.
those things. Like I said,
Yeah,
just a
because
master class.
we mentioned like Black Freighter and how that's like so such a cool thing. Rorschach's journal and how that is moving the story along is really cool. You got Rorschach's journal, you got Tales of the Black Freighter, you got Under the Hood. You got all these things that are just contributing to this overall story, apart from the things that are happening in the immediate narrative.
Yeah.
And it's just
I just obviously we are not the first people to praise Watchmen, as we talked about.
oh sure,
It was the only comic book to make the Times best stories of the 100 best. I forgot what the title is, but it's like the 100 best stories of all time. The only one comic book made it on there, and it was Watchmen. So it's well deserved, critically
absolutely,
acclaimed, great comic book. And it's not my favorite comic of all time. That's Scott Pilgrim versus the World, but I think it is the best comic ever written. That's the way that I, in my mind, organize it. It's like this is the best. I love it, but it's not my favorite. So, 100%. I want to talk about the animated one that just came out this week. There's going to be two parts to this, and it's produced by DC. I was initially kind of hesitant because number one, it's adapting the unadaptable. And then number
hmm
two, it's the style of animation that I am not a fan of. And I've told you this off mic before. There was a show in the 90s called Reboot, and it was like the first CG animated show on TV. It was taking a page from Toy Story, but the budget was not as big as Toy Story, so it didn't look as good. And the animation is so stiff and so robotic. I'm like, ah, I cannot watch this. I have to have fluidity in my animation. Like I have to
sure,
have think under into the Spider Verse, across the Spider Verse. I have to have that type of fluidity in my animation. And so there's been a number of these types of shows that I look to and say, as soon as I see it, I'm like, ooh, I don't like that. That Green Lantern show that was on HBO, and I'm blanking on the name of it, but when I saw it, I was like, oh, it's that style of animation that I don't like. So when this Watchmen Chapter One came out, or Part One, the trailer, I was like, oh no, they're doing that animated style. I would rather them do it a hand drawn 2D animated. But now that I've watched it, I started off, I was like, oh, I just watched 5 minutes. I ended up watching the entire 90-minute thing. And number one, it was a good refresher on the story because I hadn't read Watchmen recently, and so I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, these are the familiar story beats." The animation was better than I thought. It was better than I expected. Still not. I would have preferred hand drawn still, but it wasn't as robotic as I thought it was going to be. And the voice acting, for the most part, was good. I really like Katie Sackhoff as Silk Spectre too. Doctor Manhattan was fine. Everybody else, the Rorschach voice is the one that stood out, and it's it's also similar to the thing that, you and I were talking about with, the Batman show, that Caped Crusader, with Hamish Linklater's Batman voice.
hmm
It's that, that gravelly voice. Like, it just is not a good when you're hearing it. Like, maybe if you're imagining it on the page and you're imagining someone's gruff voice, it's okay, but when I'm hearing that, it just doesn't sound good. It sounds like somebody's trying to do a voice. They're trying to do an imitation of something,
yeah.
and it just doesn't work for me. You heard snippets of it, right?
Yeah, I started watching it,
Oh,
and
okay.
like when because Titus Welliver plays
Who I
Rorschach.
like. I like
Yeah,
that
I
as
do too.
actor.
He's a good actor, but like some of the delivery of the lines, because when you read some of those lines, like people will shout "Save us," and I'll whisper "No." Like that's an iconic Watchmen
Yes.
line, and the delivery of Titus Welliver's performance in that is it just doesn't land, and that's the problem with me. Michael Service, who I know and love from Fringe, plays Dr. Manhattan, and
Oh,
when
okay.
I heard he was the voice of Dr. Manhattan, I'm like, well, that's perfect because he's very good at doing the detached humanity that you would need for Dr.
Yeah,
Manhattan. And
yeah,
so, yeah, that was perfect.
yeah.
I haven't gotten
I,
Katie Sackhoff yet, so I'm excited.
okay, yeah. I think you'll enjoy her performance. Jackie Earl Haley played Rorschach in the Zack Snyder film, and I liked his delivery, his
Uh
performance
huh.
of the Rorschach voice. So that's an example of like a better way to do it. Um, so yeah, that was the only thing that kind of took me out of it. But one thing that I really like, and they've, it's funny, DC, I have mixed feelings on how they have handled the Watchmen franchise. Um, the before Watchmen stuff that they released, and they did another animated version of Watchmen before this. They did an I forgot what they called it, a motion comic where it
Uh
was
huh.
basically just an animated thing. And
And
they've
they
done
did
a
Tales of
tail
the Black Freighter.
they did that as a separate animated. And on the one hand, it's like I like the story so much that yeah, I like seeing it over and over again. But then on the other hand, I really would like to respect the creator, Alan Moore's. He said, I don't want this like a- adapted to death. I don't want t-shirts. I don't want merchandise. Like, and how many times have you seen the Watchmen
Oh,
t-shirt,
sure,
like
sure,
with
sure.
the
And
blood
also,
drop smiley face?
there was where they were tying the Watchmen characters to the main DC line. I don't know if you remember
Yeah,
this.
right. Yeah. And the
Where
what was the Jeff Johns the clock thing that he did, which I was not a fan of. They tied Dr. Manhattan to Superman, and it was like I didn't like that.
yeah, it started in Flashpoint.
Yes, that's right.
It started in Flashpoint, and yeah, like something. It's the Doomsday Clock.
Doomsday Clock. Yes, that's right.
Um, and yeah,
Not a
so
fan.
they've been doing that. Uh, so yeah, I can understand that. And the thing is, like, you can't do Tales of the Black Freighter without the Watchmen story to supplement
Right.
it. Like you do
You know
Tales
what?
of the Black
Weird.
Freighter, it just seems like a pirate story.
Right. And they had Gerard Butler do the main pirate in that, and I thought he did a good job. But like you said, it's tied to Watchmen. It's integral to Watchmen. So I like that in this new version, they have it. It goes into like you'll be in the Watchmen story, then it just goes right into the Tales of the Black Freighter. So it's similar to the reading experience, and that's what I like. I like that um, they're trying to get as close to the comic book feel and experience as possible. So overall, I actually enjoyed the chapter one or part one of this animated version way more than I thought I was going to. I went into it
Good.
with low expectations and came out, oh, that wasn't bad. It wasn't great. Like, I'm not going to tell you this is Pixar level, the highest quality Pixar, but yeah, I would say this is a fair adaptation so far. We still have part 2 to go. We'll see how they do on that, but I would give it a 3 out of 5. Like, it was good. It was okay. We enjoyed Watchmen. Obviously, you should enjoy Watchmen. Check it out. There's a reason why it's the most acclaimed comic of all time. And I would say check out the animated part one. If you have a chance, it's worth a watch. I'll say just to see how they adapted it and how they fit it into this first part. So check out all of the things that we talked about. Mark Waid's Daredevil run, Watchmen, also the DC little, what are they called? Compact
Compact
comics.
Comics.
Yeah. Let us know your thoughts on all of these things down in the comments section below. If you haven't subscribed to this Comic Cooks, we're going to be talking more comics, and more comics. We're going to be telling you why we think comics are the best medium and the best storytelling format in the entire world. So check us out here every week on this Comic Cook.